The wedding night wasn't supposed to end like this. Elara stood in the center of the master bedroom, still wearing her silk gown, watching her husband of 6 hours walk out the door. Not to attend to business, not to take a moment alone, but to go to her. The woman with copper hair and knowing eyes who'd watched the ceremony from the third pew with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. The door clicked shut. The hallway echoed with his footsteps, growing fainter. Elara's hands trembled, not with tears, those would come later in private, where no one could use them against her, but with something colder, sharper. This was supposed to be a transaction. Money for title. Her father's industrial fortune for the Rowe family's crumbling legacy. She'd accepted that. She'd prepared for distance, for formality, maybe even for indifference. But humiliation? On the first night? No, that she had not agreed to. Outside, rain battered the windows of Ashmont Hall. Somewhere in this vast, decaying estate, her new husband was choosing another woman. And Elara Whitcomb, now Elara Rowe, Duchess of Ashmont, whether anyone liked it or not, made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't leaving, she was staying, and she was going to win. Stay with me until the end. Drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The marriage had been arranged in her father's study 3 months earlier. Over brandy she wasn't offered and documents she wasn't asked to read. It's done, Richard Whitcomb had said, not looking at her. He never did, not really. Elara had learned early that to her father she was a balance sheet entry. Valuable, yes, but only insofar as she could be spent wisely. You'll marry the Duke of Ashmont. The wedding is set for November. Elara had been standing by the window, watching workers load iron beams onto rail cars in the yard below. The Whitcomb steel mills ran day and night, feeding the empire her grandfather had built from nothing. She was 23. She spoke 3 languages. She could calculate compound interest faster than her father's accountant and knew the difference between Sheffield plate and sterling silver at a glance. None of it mattered. Does he know? She'd asked quietly. Does who know what? The Duke. Does he know I don't want this? Her father had laughed, a short, barking sound. Want? Elara, this is the finest match in England. The Rowes are one of the oldest families in the country. You'll be a duchess of a bankrupt estate, which your dowry will restore. Everyone wins. She'd turned from the window then, meeting his eyes. Except me. You'll have position, respectability, a title that money alone can't buy. He'd stood, signaling the conversation's end. Your mother would have been proud. That was the blade he always used. Her mother, dead since Elara was 7, crystallized into sainthood. The perfect daughter would honor her memory. The perfect daughter would be grateful. Elara had left the study with her spine straight and her face composed. She'd gone to her room and thrown a crystal vase against the wall. But the Duke of Ashmont came to call exactly once before the wedding. Alistair Rowe was 31, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of severe features that looked like they'd been carved rather than born. He had gray eyes that gave nothing away and a mouth that seemed to have forgotten how to smile. They'd sat in the drawing room with her father present, discussing nothing of importance. The weather, the estate, the repairs needed to the east wing. Not once did Alistair look directly at her. Not once did he ask her a single question. When he left, her father had clapped his hands together. Well, that went splendidly. He's a serious man, Elara. Dignified. You'll make a fine match. Elara had watched the Duke's carriage disappear down the drive. He doesn't want this either, she'd thought. The difference is, he gets to choose his consolations. She'd heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. The Duke of Ashmont kept a mistress, had kept the same one for 7 years. Vivien Hargrave, daughter of a minor baronet, beautiful in that effortless way that made other women feel like they were trying too hard. She lived in a house he provided, wore jewels he bought, attended events where wives could not go. It was an arrangement, discreet by aristocratic standards, until it wasn't. The wedding took place on a gray November morning in London, at a church far too grand for the occasion. Elara wore ivory silk that cost more than most families earned in a year. Her father gave her away with obvious satisfaction. Alistair spoke his vows in a voice that could have been reading a grocery list. When the vicar said, "You may kiss the bride," Alistair had brushed his lips against her cheek, barely contact at all, and stepped back immediately. The breakfast afterward was attended by 200 people Elara didn't know. They smiled at her, congratulated her, called her Your Grace, with varying degrees of warmth. She smiled back, thanked them, played the part flawlessly. Across the room, Alistair stood with a group of men, discussing something that made them all look grave and important. He hadn't spoken to her since the ceremony. And then Elara saw her. Vivien Hargrave sat in the third row, wearing midnight blue, her copper hair pinned in a style that was just fashionable enough to avoid criticism, but distinct enough to draw eyes. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't ashamed. She was there, at the wedding. Elara's fingers tightened on her champagne glass. "Are you quite all right, Your Grace?" She turned to find an older woman, lady, someone, she'd already forgotten, watching her with shrewd eyes. "Perfectly well, thank you." It's a great deal to adjust to, I'm sure. Marriage, a new household. The woman's gaze flickered toward Vivien, then back. "The Duke is a complex man." "All interesting people are," Elara said smoothly. Lady Someone's mouth twitched. "Indeed. Well, I wish you luck, my dear. You'll need it." Keith. They traveled to Ashmont Hall that afternoon, a 3-hour journey north into the countryside. Alistair rode in the carriage with her, but spent the entire time reading correspondence. His shoulder angled away. Elara looked out the window and said nothing. The estate appeared through the trees just as dusk settled in, a massive stone manor house that had clearly seen better days. Sections of the roof were patched with newer slate. Ivy covered the west wing so thoroughly it looked like the building was being slowly consumed. The grounds, once carefully manicured, now had a wild, untended quality. It was beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful. Haunting. Lonely. "Home," Alistair said flatly, not looking up from his papers. The staff assembled to greet them, a thin line of servants who looked uncertain whether to bow or curtsy or simply run. The housekeeper, Mrs. Calloway, was a stern woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and a face that suggested she'd seen everything twice and hadn't been impressed the first time. "Your Grace," she said, addressing Alistair. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Your Grace to Elara." "Mrs. Calloway will show you to your rooms," Alistair said. He was already walking away toward what Elara would later learn was his study. Dinner at 8. That was it. No tour. No introduction to the house. No acknowledgement that she'd just left everything she knew to live in this crumbling monument to his family's faded glory. Elara followed Mrs. Calloway up a grand staircase that creaked ominously, down a long hallway lined with portraits of severe-looking people who all seemed to share Alistair's ability to look disappointed without changing expression. "These are your quarters, Your Grace." Mrs. Calloway opened a door to reveal a large bedroom decorated in shades of cream and gold that had probably been fashionable 30 years ago. "The Duke's chambers are through there." She gestured to a connecting door. Elara's rooms were cold. Beautiful in a formal way, but cold. Like a museum. Like a place meant to be admired, not lived in. "Will you require assistance dressing for dinner?" "No, thank you. I can manage." Mrs. Calloway hesitated at the door. For a moment, something almost like sympathy crossed her face. "Welcome to Ashmont Hall, Your Grace." Then she was gone. Elara stood in the center of the room, still wearing her traveling clothes, and felt the weight of it all settle on her shoulders. This was her life now. This cold house. This distant man. This title that meant nothing if the person wearing it was invisible. She walked to the window. The gardens below were overgrown, but she could see the ghost of what they'd been. Formal hedges, a fountain, pathways that probably once gleamed with gravel. "I could fix this," she thought suddenly. "I could make this beautiful again." Then she laughed, a bitter sound in the empty room. What did it matter? She could restore the gardens, the house, the entire estate. None of it would change the fact that she'd been purchased like furniture. Expensive furniture, certainly, but furniture nonetheless. Opati. Dinner was served in a dining room large enough to seat 40. Just the two of them sat at opposite ends of a table designed for feasts, with enough space between them that conversation would require shouting. Alistair ate methodically, cutting his meat with precision, not looking up. Elara watched him for 3 courses, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Finally, as the staff cleared the plates, she spoke. Do you intend to ignore me for the duration of our marriage? Or is this a special effort for the first day? His fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. I'm not ignoring you. No. What would you call this then? Dinner. This is a performance of dinner. We're sitting in the same room, but we might as well be in different countries. Alistair's jaw tightened. What exactly do you want from me, Elara? It was the first time he'd said her name. Acknowledgement would be a start. I'm not a piece of furniture. I didn't ask for this marriage any more than you did, but we're in it now. The least we could do is be civil. I am being civil. You're being absent. There's a difference. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I have work to do. Excuse me. Of course, Elara said quietly. Work. How convenient. He stopped at the doorway, his back to her. For a long moment he stood there, silent. Then, I didn't want to marry you. I know. This wasn't my choice. Nor mine. Then why? He turned, and for the first time there was something in his eyes besides indifference. Frustration. Maybe even pain. Why are you pushing this? Because I have to live here, Elara said, meeting his gaze. With you. In this house. For the rest of my life, presumably. And I refuse to spend those years being invisible. Alistair stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. She couldn't read what. Good night, Elara, he said finally, and left. She sat alone at the enormous table, surrounded by the ghosts of grander times, and finished her wine in silence. The bedroom door opened at midnight. Elara had been reading, or trying to read, wrapped in a dressing gown by the fire. She looked up as Alistair entered through the connecting door. He'd changed out of his dinner clothes into a dark robe. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. I thought we should... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. It's our wedding night. Elara set down her book slowly. Is it? Yes. And you've decided to honor that tradition now? At midnight? After ignoring me all day? His expression hardened. This is what's expected. Expected, Elara repeated. She stood, keeping the fire between them. By whom? Your family? Society? The terms of the contract my father signed? All of the above. I see. And what you want doesn't factor into it. What I want is irrelevant. Then we finally agree on something, Elara said. What I want is also irrelevant. We're both trapped in this magnificent farce, performing our roles. So tell me, Alistair, what role am I performing tonight? The dutiful wife? The grateful bride? The woman who's supposed to pretend she doesn't know you'd rather be anywhere else? His hands clenched at his sides. You're making this difficult. I'm making this honest. Honesty has nothing to do with this. It's... No, Elara said softly. It doesn't, does it? This is about duty, about heirs, about making sure the estate passes to legitimate children so your family line continues and my father's investment is secure. It's business. Alistair's face was stone. Yes. Then conduct your business elsewhere. Elara walked to the connecting door and held it open. Because I won't be lying back and thinking of England for a man who can't even bring himself to pretend he wants to be here. For a moment, just a moment, something like shock crossed his features. You're refusing me? I'm refusing this. If you want a wife who'll spread her legs on command and never ask questions, you married the wrong woman. If you want to fulfill your obligations, fine, but you'll do it with something resembling respect or not at all. They stood there staring at each other across 6 feet of expensive carpet, and Elara could see him calculating, weighing his options, his rights as a husband versus the scene she was clearly willing to cause. This is absurd, he said finally. Then leave. He did, but not toward his own rooms. He headed for the hallway, but not toward the main stairs. And Elara knew with sudden crushing certainty exactly where he was going. She followed, not rushing, not making noise, just walking with perfect, deliberate calm down the hallway, down the stairs, through the portrait gallery, where all those disappointed rows watched from their frames. She reached the ground floor just in time to see Alistair's carriage pulling away from the house, heading toward the gate, toward the road, toward wherever Vivien Hargrave was waiting. Elara stood at the window, watching the carriage lights disappear into the dark. Her hands were shaking again. Not with tears, not anymore. With rage. Pure, clarifying rage. He'd left her, on their wedding night, after trying to claim his husbandly rights. When she'd said no, when she'd demanded the bare minimum of dignity, he'd gone to her. The message was clear. Elara was the obligation. Vivian was the choice. Behind her, she heard a soft cough. Mrs. Calloway stood in the doorway to the servants' hall, her face carefully neutral. "Your Grace, is there anything you require?" Elara turned from the window. The housekeeper's eyes held something Elara hadn't seen there before. Not sympathy, exactly. More like recognition. The acknowledgement of one woman watching another face the reality of her circumstances. "Yes," Elara said, her voice steady. "I'll need a complete accounting of the household by morning. Every room, every servant, every expense. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Mrs. Calloway's eyebrows rose fractionally. "That's quite a lot of information, Your Grace. I have time. My husband appears to be otherwise engaged." A pause. Then, "Very good, Your Grace. I'll have it ready." "And Mrs. Calloway?" "Yes?" "I won't be requiring the master bedroom suite. Have my things moved to the rose room in the east wing. I prefer the morning light." Something that might have been approval flickered in the older woman's eyes. "Of course. I'll see to it immediately." "But see..." Elara didn't sleep that night. She sat in the library, a vast room lined with books nobody had read in decades, and began making lists. The house needed repairs. The staff was too small for an estate this size. The grounds were in shambles. The tenants, she'd glimpsed their cottages on the drive-in, lived in conditions that would shame any decent landlord. This place was dying, slowly, beautifully, but dying nonetheless. And her husband didn't seem to care about any of it. He'd taken her father's money, a staggering sum, enough to restore 10 estates, and apparently planned to... What? Let it all continue crumbling while he played house with his mistress? No. Elara pressed her pen to paper and began to write. She'd been raised in her father's house, after all. She'd grown up watching him build an empire from steel and will. She knew how to run things, how to manage people, how to turn chaos into order. If Alistair wanted to abdicate his responsibilities, fine. She'd take them instead. By dawn, she had a plan. Ambitious, aggressive, almost certainly going to make her wildly unpopular with everyone involved. She didn't care. Mrs. Calloway found her there at 6 in the morning, still dressed in her nightgown and robe, surrounded by paper. "Your Grace, I have the household accounts you requested." "Excellent. Set them there." Elara gestured to the desk without looking up. "And send for the groundskeeper and the estate manager. I want to see them both within the hour." "The estate manager is not currently in residence." Elara glanced up. "Where is he?" "He visits quarterly. He was last here in October." "Quarterly?" Elara set down her pen. "Who's managing the day-to-day operations?" "No one, Your Grace. His Grace handles correspondence when necessary, but otherwise the estate runs itself, or doesn't run at all." Mrs. Calloway said nothing. Elara stood, gathering her papers. "We're going to change that starting today. His Grace may object." "His Grace," Elara said crisply, "is welcome to object in person, when he returns. Until then, I'm the only member of this household actually present, which makes me in charge by default." She swept past the housekeeper heading for the stairs. Behind her, very quietly, she heard Mrs. Calloway say, "Good." Alistair returned 3 days later. Elara was in the gardens when his carriage pulled up, directing workers as they cleared the overgrown sections, restoring the pathways, uncovering the fountain that had been buried under years of neglect. She didn't stop working when she saw him. He climbed down from the carriage, looking tired. His clothes were rumpled. There were shadows under his eyes. He walked across the lawn toward her, and she could see the exact moment he registered what was happening. The workers. The tools. The systematic destruction of the wilderness his gardens had become. "What is this?" he asked. Elara pulled off her gardening gloves. Restoration. The gardens were a disgrace. I didn't authorize this. You weren't here to authorize anything. His jaw clenched. Elara, the groundskeeper says it'll take 6 weeks to restore the formal sections. The fountain needs new plumbing. The hedges need complete reshaping. I've allocated funds from the household budget. You had no right. I have every right. I'm your wife. This is my home now, whether either of us likes it. And I will not live in squalor while you hide from your responsibilities. Alistair stepped closer, lowering his voice. Where I go and what I do is none of your concern. You're absolutely right, Elara said pleasantly. Just as what I do here is none of yours. We have an arrangement, after all. You've made your priorities very clear. I'm simply establishing mine. This is my estate, built with my money. Or did you forget that part? My father didn't give you £250,000 to watch you let everything rot. His hands were fists now. You overstep. I'm barely getting started. They stood there glaring at each other across 2 feet of manicured lawn, and Elara saw something shift in his eyes. A kind of reassessment. She wasn't behaving like the meek, grateful bride he'd expected. She was pushing back, taking territory, challenging him. We need to talk, he said finally. About what? About boundaries, expectations, how this marriage is going to function. I tried to have that conversation 3 days ago, Elara said. You left instead, so I made my own decisions. If you don't like them, perhaps you should stay home more often. She walked away before he could respond, heading back toward the house. Behind her, she heard him say her name, once, sharply. She didn't turn around. She had work to do. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she was the one in control. Let him chase her for once. Let him wonder what she was going to do next. Let him realize that the quiet, obedient wife he'd purchased wasn't the woman he was actually living with. Elara Whitcomb had always been good at playing roles. The dutiful daughter, the accomplished young lady, the perfect bride. But Elara Rowe, she was going to be something else entirely. Something even she hadn't fully discovered yet. And Alistair had just given her all the motivation she needed to find out exactly what that was. The meeting happened in the study the next morning, with Mrs. Calloway standing witness like a referee at a boxing match. Alistair sat behind the massive oak desk that had belonged to his father and grandfather before him. Elara took the chair across from him without waiting to be invited. She dressed carefully, a deep green day dress, hair pinned severely back, every inch the Duchess, even if she didn't feel like one. You've been busy, Alistair said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. Invoices, work orders, her neat handwriting across all of them. Someone had to be. I didn't authorize any of this. You didn't forbid it either. You were gone. His fingers drummed once against the leather desktop. Mrs. Calloway tells me you've also reorganized the staff schedule, dismissed 2 groundskeepers, and hired 3 new maids. The groundskeepers were stealing. The maids were necessary. This house has 40 rooms and 6 people trying to maintain them. It's absurd. Those decisions should have gone through me. Then be here to make them. Elara leaned forward slightly. You can't have it both ways, Alistair. Either you manage this estate or I will. But I won't sit in my room doing embroidery while everything falls apart around me. Mrs. Calloway cleared her throat softly. If I may, Your Grace, the improvements have been noticed. The staff is pleased. Alistair's eyes cut to the housekeeper. Pleased. The Duchess has been fair, firm, but fair. And she pays on time, which is more than... She stopped herself. More than what? Elara asked. A long pause. Then Mrs. Calloway said quietly, more than they're accustomed to, Your Grace. Elara turned back to Alistair. You haven't been paying the staff? They've been paid. Regularly? His silence was answer enough. How long? Elara demanded. It's been managed. How long? 6 months, he said finally. There were delays, cash flow issues. They understood. Elara sat back, genuinely shocked. You brought me here. You married me for my father's money, and you haven't even been paying your own servants? The estate revenues are seasonal. The investment timeline was longer than anticipated. That's not an excuse. These people work for you. They depend on you. She stood abruptly. Mrs. Calloway, I want a list of everyone owed back wages. I'll settle the accounts this week. Elara, that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary. They're not working for free while you figure out your finances. She turned to leave, then stopped. And another thing, I want a full tour of the tenant cottages. Today. Alistair rose from his chair. The tenants are not your concern. Everything on this estate is my concern. I live here. My name is attached to this place now, whether I chose it or not. If there are problems, I want to know about them. There are always problems. That's the nature of running an estate. Then let's start solving them. She walked out before he could argue further, Mrs. Calloway following in her wake. Behind them, Elara heard something hit the desk. His fist, probably. Good. Let him be angry. She was angry too, and at least anger was honest. The tour of the tenant cottages was worse than she'd imagined. 12 families lived on Ashmont lands, farming sections of the estate in exchange for rent and a percentage of their yields. The arrangement was generations old, and from what Elara could see, hadn't been updated in just as long. The first cottage they visited belonged to the Pratts, a family of 6 crammed into 3 rooms with a roof that leaked in 2 places and windows that didn't close properly. It's not so bad, Your Grace, Mrs. Pratt said nervously, wiping her hands on her apron. She was younger than Elara, with tired eyes and a baby on her hip. We manage. When was the roof last repaired? Mrs. Pratt glanced at her husband, who stood in the doorway looking like he wanted to disappear. 3 years, maybe? We've asked, but nothing's been done. His Grace has a lot on his mind. We understand. His Grace, Elara said crisply, is about to have repairs added to that list. I'll send someone out this week. The woman's eyes widened. Oh, we couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. It's basic decency. She visited all 12 cottages that afternoon. Everyone told the same story. Neglect, delayed repairs, promises made and not kept. The families were polite, deferential, clearly afraid to complain. But Elara could read the exhaustion in their faces, the resignation. By the time she returned to the main house, she was furious. She found Alistair in the stables, checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. He looked up as she approached, wariness crossing his features. The Pratt's roof is falling in, Elara said without preamble. The Denisons don't have a working well. The Carters are living with black mold in their walls. How long have you known about this? He straightened, brushing hay from his hands. The estate manager handles tenant issues. The one who visits quarterly? That manager? I can't be everywhere at once, Elara. You're not anywhere. You're certainly not here, managing the place that's supposedly your legacy. You took my father's money, and you're letting everything rot. The house, the grounds, the people who depend on you. Enough. His voice went hard. You've been here a week. Don't presume to understand the complexities. I understand that 12 families are living in conditions you'd never tolerate for yourself. I understand that you're so busy running away from this place that you can't see what's happening right in front of you. Running away? He stepped closer, anger finally showing in his face. I've given everything to this estate. Everything. Do you know what it's like inheriting a title with no money to support it? Watching your family's legacy crumble while everyone expects you to fix it like it's simple? Then why did you marry me? Elara shot back. You had the solution. The money's here. Use it. It's not that easy. It's exactly that easy. You're choosing not to do the work. You're choosing to hide instead. His hands clenched. You know nothing about my choices. I know you chose to leave me on our wedding night. I know you choose her over every responsibility you have. So don't talk to me about complexity when you can't even face your own life. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Alistair's face had gone completely blank, that terrible, aristocratic mask that revealed nothing. When he spoke, his voice was ice. You're dismissed. I'm your wife, not your servant. Then act like it. Stay in your place and stop interfering in matters you don't understand. Elara felt something snap inside her chest. My place? Is that what you think I'm supposed to do? Sit quietly while you destroy everything around you? I won't. I can't. She turned and walked away before he could see her hands shaking. That night, She sat in her new bedroom in the East Wing, smaller than the Duchess's suite, but with better light and a view of the gardens, and wrote a letter to her father's banker. She needed access to her dowry. Not all of it, just enough to start making real changes. The response came back within 3 days, denied. The money was controlled by Alistair. As her husband, he had legal authority over her finances. She couldn't touch a penny without his approval. Elara crumpled the letter in her fist. Trapped. Legally, financially, socially, trapped. But she'd faced impossible situations before. Her father had taught her that much, at least. When the direct path is blocked, find another way. 2 weeks later, the Ashmont estate hosted its first dinner party in 5 years. Elara had sent the invitations herself, using the Duchess's personal stationery she'd found in a desk drawer. 20 guests, local gentry, neighboring landowners, people who mattered in the county's social structure. Mrs. Calloway had nearly fainted when Elara told her, "Your Grace, we haven't entertained in years. The dining room isn't prepared. We don't have enough staff. Then we'll prepare it and hire more staff if necessary. His Grace won't approve. His Grace can tell me that himself, if he bothers to come home." Alistair had been gone for 4 days this time. Not a word. Just vanished. The party was Elara's gauntlet thrown down. Either he'd show up and play the dutiful duke, or he'd humiliate himself in front of everyone who mattered. Either way, she won. She spent days planning every detail. The menu, the seating arrangements, even the flowers, arranged herself, since the budget was tight and she'd discovered a talent for making things beautiful with limited resources. The night of the party, the house gleamed, candles everywhere, silver polished until it shone. The dining room, properly cleaned for the first time in years, looked almost regal. Elara dressed in burgundy silk, her mother's pearls at her throat. She looked like a duchess, felt like a fraud. The guests began arriving at 7. Alistair appeared at 6:55. He came down the stairs in formal evening wear, looking like he'd just stepped out of a tailor's window. His face was unreadable, but his eyes found hers across the entrance hall and held. "You invited people to my house without consulting me," he said quietly, stopping beside her. "I invited people to our house," Elara corrected, "and you were unavailable for consultation. This is manipulative. This is necessary. We're supposed to be a couple. Let's at least pretend convincingly." The first knock came at the door. Alistair offered his arm with obvious reluctance. "We'll discuss this later. I look forward to it." They greeted guests together, the perfect portrait of newlywed nobility. Elara smiled and charmed and introduced herself to people who examined her with barely concealed curiosity. The new Duchess, the industrial heiress, the woman who'd bought her way into their world. Dinner was a performance. Elara had seated herself at the opposite end of the table from Alistair, forcing them to orchestrate the evening together. She directed conversation, drew out shy guests, kept everything flowing smoothly. She'd grown up watching her father entertain business partners. This was the same skill set, just different costumes. Across the table, she caught Alistair watching her more than once. His expression was complicated, annoyed maybe, but also surprised. Good. Let him be surprised. Let him realize she wasn't going to hide. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton said, leaning toward Elara, "we were so delighted to receive your invitation. It's been far too long since Ashmont Hall opened its doors." "I intend to change that," Elara said smoothly. "The estate has been too isolated. I'd like to remedy that. How refreshing! And the house looks wonderful, the gardens especially. I noticed the work being done." "A work in progress, but I'm pleased with the direction." Across from her, Lord Pemberton addressed Alistair. "Your Duchess is quite the force of nature, Roe. You're a lucky man." Alistair's smile was tight. "Indeed." After dinner, the men retired to the study for brandy and cigars. The women gathered in the drawing room, and Elara found herself the center of attention, some of it friendly, much of it assessing. "Tell me, Your Grace," an older woman named Mrs. Hartwell said with a sharp smile, "how are you finding country life? It must be quite different from London." "I'm finding it full of potential," Elara said carefully. "Such a diplomatic answer, but surely you must find it isolating? The Duke is often away, I understand." There it was. The knife slipped in gently. Everyone in the room was watching her now. Elara set down her teacup with perfect composure. The Duke has many responsibilities. As do I. We found our rhythm. How modern of you. I prefer to think of it as practical. Mrs. Hartwell's smile sharpened. And Miss Hargrave? Is she part of this practical arrangement? The room went silent. Elara felt every eye on her, waiting to see if she'd crack. This was the test. The real reason half these women had come, to see if the new Duchess knew about the Mistress, and more importantly, what she'd do about it. She could feel her pulse in her throat, but she'd learned from her father that power belongs to whoever refuses to flinch. I'm afraid I don't know the lady, Elara said pleasantly. Should I? Oh, surely you've heard I've heard many things since arriving in the country. Most of them seem to be gossip, which I find terribly dull. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Shall we rejoin the gentleman? Signaling the end. She walked out with her head high, leading the women back toward the study, and didn't let herself shake until she was alone in the hallway for 5 seconds, pretending to adjust her gloves. The party ended just after midnight. Elara stood at the door, saying goodbye to guests who thanked her effusively for a lovely evening. Success, by any measure. She'd established herself, proven she could manage the social obligations of her position. When the last carriage pulled away, she closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. Alistair stood in the hallway, watching her. That was quite a performance, he said. Which part? All of it. You played them perfectly. I wasn't playing, I was surviving. He walked closer. Mrs. Hartwell's comment about Vivien. So they were going to do this. Now, here. Yes? Elara said. You handled it well. Did you expect me to collapse in tears? 'Cause a scene? I don't know what I expected from you. He looked genuinely confused. You're not what I thought you'd be. What did you think I'd be? Compliant, grateful, maybe. My father always said the Whitcombs were ambitious, that you'd be thrilled to be a duchess. Elara laughed, a hollow sound. Thrilled? Yes, I'm thrilled to be purchased like property and then ignored. It's been every girl's dream. That's not fair, None of this is fair. The exhaustion and anger and fear she'd been holding in all night came rushing out. You treat me like I'm invisible, except when it's convenient. You take my father's money and do nothing with it. You let this estate fall apart and then get angry when I try to fix it. And meanwhile, you parade your mistress in front of everyone like I'm supposed to just accept it. I never paraded. She was at our wedding, Alistair. At the church. Watching me marry you while everyone whispered about it. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? He went still. I didn't invite her. But you didn't stop her either. Silence. Heavy and thick. No, Wassam, he said finally. I didn't. Oh. Why? Elara's voice cracked despite herself. What did I do to deserve this? I know you didn't choose me, but I didn't choose you either, and I'm still trying. I'm still here. Why can't you even pretend to care? Alistair's face twisted, the mask cracking for just a moment. Because caring makes it worse. What? This isn't real, Elara. This marriage, this whole thing. It's a business arrangement that we're both stuck in for the rest of our lives. If I let myself care, if I let myself want... He stopped, turning away. It's easier not to. Easier for who? For both of us. You don't get to decide what's easier for me. He faced her again, and there was something raw in his eyes. What do you want from me, really? I want you to be here. To try. To act like we're partners in this instead of strangers who happen to live in the same house. And Vivien is not my concern. The lie tasted bitter, but Elara said it anyway. What you do when you're not here is your business. But when you are here, I want you present, actually present, not just physically occupying space. Alistair stared at her for a long moment. I don't know if I can do that. Then learn. Elara straightened, gathering what was left of her composure. Because I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to fix this estate. I'm going to restore these lands and help these people and make something of this place. You can help me or you can hide. But either way, I'm done being invisible. She walked past him, heading for the stairs. Elara! She stopped but didn't turn. That dinner tonight, he said quietly. It was impressive. You were impressive. Thank you. I'm sorry about the wedding, about Vivian being there. I should have. It wasn't right. It was the first real apology he'd given her. Elara felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. Good night, Alistair. She went upstairs, closed her door, and finally let herself cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from release. From the sheer weight of maintaining that perfect facade all night while her entire world felt like it was crumbling. But when she woke the next morning, she got up and got dressed and went back to work. Because crying changed nothing, action did. The following week brought an unexpected visitor. Elara was in the estate office, a small room off the library that she'd claimed as her own, reviewing the latest repair estimates when Mrs. Calloway announced, "Miss Vivien Hargrave to see you, Your Grace." Elara's pen stopped mid-word. "I'm sorry?" "Bossy, boss thought." "Miss Hargrave, she's in the drawing room. She asked to speak with you." "Ma'am tot bossy." Of all the audacious, brazen, "Show her in," Elara said calmly. Mrs. Calloway's eyebrows rose. "Here, Your Grace." "Yes, and stay, please. I'd like a witness." 5 minutes later, Vivien Hargrave walked into Elara's office like she owned it. She was beautiful. That was the first thing that hit Elara like a fist to the stomach. Genuinely, effortlessly beautiful. With copper hair that caught the light and green eyes that assessed everything in a single sweep. She wore a deep blue traveling dress with fur trim, expensive, tasteful. Everything about her screamed refinement, which somehow made it worse. "Your Grace," Vivien said, inclining her head slightly. "Thank you for seeing me, Iketori." "I don't recall having a choice." Elara set down her pen but didn't stand, didn't offer a seat. "What do you want, Miss Hargrave?" Vivian's smile was slight. "Direct. I appreciate that." "I'm busy. Get to the point." "Very well." She moved closer to the desk, and Elara could smell her perfume, something floral and complex. "I wanted to meet you, the new Duchess, the woman who's changing everything." "I'm not changing anything that matters to you. Aren't you?" Vivien tilted her head. "You're making quite an impression. The dinner party was all anyone talked about at Lady Pemberton's tea yesterday. The dynamic Duchess, bringing Ashmont back to life. If you came here for compliments, you're wasting both our time. I came here to understand you." "Why?" "Because you're not what I expected." Vivian's eyes held something complicated. "You're not cowering. You're not running back to London in tears. You're fighting. What did you expect me to do?" "Accept the arrangement. Most women in your position would. Take the title, take the money, look the other way. Live separate lives." "Most women," Elara said coldly, "haven't been humiliated on their wedding night." Something flickered in Vivian's expression. "He told you. He didn't have to. I know where he went." Silence. Then Vivien said quietly, "He was angry, confused. He didn't know what to do with you. And you did?" "I've known Alistair for 7 years. I understand him." "Congratulations." Elara stood, placing both hands on the desk. "Now, understand this. I don't care about your history with him. I don't care about your arrangement or your feelings or whatever comfortable little world you've built together. This is my home now, my life, and I won't be pushed aside." Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "I'm not trying to push you aside." "Then what are you doing here? Trying to make this easier for everyone? By humiliating me at my own wedding? By continuing to see my husband while I'm expected to smile and pretend it doesn't matter? I didn't want to hurt you, but you did." Elara's voice went soft. "Dangerous. You did hurt me. And you don't get to walk in here and ask for my understanding or my permission or whatever it is you're really after. You want to keep him? Fine. But you won't do it in my house. You won't do it in front of me. And you certainly won't do it with my blessing." Vivian's face had gone pale. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was agreeing to this marriage in the first place. But I'm stuck with it now, and I'll be damned if I let you dictate the terms." "Alistair cares about me." "Then he should have married you." The words exploded out of Elara before she could stop them. If you're so perfect together, if you understand him so well, why didn't he choose you? Why did he need my father's money and my family's fortune to save his precious estate? Vivien flinched like she'd been slapped. That's what I thought, Elara said, her voice shaking now. You can give him comfort, companionship, whatever else you provide, but you couldn't give him what he actually needed. So here we are. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Now get out of my house. For a moment, Vivien just stood there, something wounded in her eyes. Then she turned and walked to the door. She paused at the threshold. He'll never love you, she said without turning around. Not the way he loves you, Elara finished. Maybe not, but he's legally bound to me. He chose that, whatever his reasons. So did you, when you let him go through with it. We all made our choices. Now, we live with them. Vivien left without another word. Elara sat down heavily, her hands trembling. Mrs. Calloway emerged from her corner, where she'd been standing silent witness. That was well done, Your Grace. I wanted to throw something at her. I noticed you showed remarkable restraint. Did I? Elara looked up. Because I feel like I just made everything worse. You set a boundary. That takes courage. Or stupidity. I probably just declared war. Mrs. Calloway's mouth twitched. Then I suggest we prepare for battle, Your Grace. Alistair found out about the visit within hours. Vivien must have gone straight to him. He came storming into the estate office where Elara was still working, his face dark with fury. What did you say to her? Elara didn't look up from her ledgers. Good afternoon to you too. Vivien came here, to this house, and you told her to leave. Yes, I did. She was upset. Good. He slammed his hand on the desk, making the inkwell jump. You had no right. I had every right. Elara shot to her feet. She came into my home, Alistair. My home. What was I supposed to do? Serve her tea and chat about the weather? She was trying to... To what? Stake her claim? Make sure I knew my place? Well, I made sure she knew hers instead. This isn't a competition. Yes, it is. Elara's voice rose. It's been a competition since the moment I arrived here and realized I was never going to win. She has your heart. I have a legal document. She has your time. I have your name. But this house, this estate, these are mine, and I won't share them with her too. Alistair stared at her, breathing hard. You're being unreasonable. I'm being human. I'm being a woman who's tired of being treated like she doesn't matter. You want to keep seeing her? I can't stop you, but she doesn't come here, not to this house. That's my line. That's the one thing I'm asking for. It's not that simple. Make it simple. Elara came around the desk, standing close enough to see the confusion in his eyes. Choose, Alistair. You can't keep us both in the same space and expect it to work. It's cruel. To her, maybe, but definitely to me. I never meant, I know, you never mean anything. You just let it all happen and then act surprised when there are consequences. She turned away, suddenly too tired to keep fighting. I'm done with this conversation. If you want to defend her, do it somewhere else. She heard him leave, his footsteps heavy on the wood floor. Alone again, Elara pressed her forehead against the cool window glass and wondered how much more of this she could take before something in her broke completely. The answer came 3 days later, in a letter edged in black. Her father was dying. The paper trembled in her hands. Her father's personal secretary had written it. Her father himself was too weak. Pneumonia, the letter said. Complications. The doctors were doing what they could, but at his age, with his weak heart, Elara read it 3 times before the words actually penetrated. Her father was dying. The man who'd raised her alone after her mother passed. The man who'd taught her numbers before letters, who'd brought her to the mill to watch steel being poured when she was barely tall enough to see over the railings. The man who'd sold her into this marriage without asking what she wanted. She should hate him for that. Part of her did. But he was still her father, and he was dying. She was packed within an hour. Mrs. Calloway helped, moving with quiet efficiency, folding dresses and stockings into the trunk without comment. When Elara's hands started shaking too badly to manage the clasps, the housekeeper did those too. Will you tell His Grace? Mrs. Calloway asked. Elara hadn't even thought about it. I'll leave a note. Perhaps you should tell him in person at... He's not here. He hasn't been here for 2 days. Since the argument about Vivian, since Elara had drawn her line in the sand. I don't have time to wait for him to decide to come home. She scrawled a brief message and left it on his desk. My father is ill. I've gone to London. E. The carriage was ready by noon. Elara climbed in, still wearing the same dress she'd put on that morning, and watched Ashmont Hall disappear behind the trees. She didn't cry, not yet. There'd be time for that later. Or maybe there wouldn't. Maybe she'd used up all her tears already. London hit her like a wall of noise and smoke and memory. The Whitcomb house stood in Belgravia, a testament to industrial money trying to look respectable. 4 stories of Portland stone, black iron railings, windows that gleamed even in the gray afternoon light. Elara had grown up here. Every room held ghosts. The butler, Henderson, who'd known her since she was 6, opened the door with red-rimmed eyes. Miss Elara, forgive me, Your Grace. We didn't expect you so soon. How is he? Henderson's face said everything. The doctor is with him now. Your presence it will mean a great deal. The house smelled like sickness. The house smelled like that particular combination of medicine and sweat and something else, something final. Elara climbed the stairs to her father's room with her heart hammering against her ribs. Dr. Morrison met her outside the door. He was old, kind, had delivered Elara herself 23 years ago. Your Grace. He took her hands. I'm glad you came. How bad is it? His lungs are very weak. The fever won't break. I've done everything I can, but... He squeezed her hands gently. Prepare yourself, my dear. I don't think he has long, and... The room was dark, curtains drawn against the afternoon light. Her father lay in the massive bed that had once belonged to Elara's grandfather, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. His breathing was labored, raspy. His face had a gray tinge that made her stomach clench. She sat in the chair beside the bed and took his hand. His eyes opened slowly. It took him a moment to focus. Elara? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, Papa. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. You came. Of course I came. The Duke is at Ashmont. This isn't about him. Her father's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Still angry with me. Yes. Good. I'd worry if you weren't. He coughed, a wet, terrible sound. When he could breathe again, he said, I made mistakes. With you. With the marriage. We don't have to talk about this now. What? When else? Another cough. I thought I was doing right. Securing your future. The Rows are good family, old blood. I thought you'd be safe. Safe? Elara repeated. The word tasted like ash. Are you? Safe? She should lie. Tell him what he wanted to hear, but she'd never been good at lying to her father, even when she hated him. I don't know what I am, she said finally, but I'm managing. That's my girl, always managing. His grip tightened slightly. The business. Henderson has the documents. Everything's prepared. When I'm gone, don't. Elara, seek. Please, not yet. They sat in silence, her hand in his, listening to his labored breathing. After a while, he said, I'm sorry. For all of it. I should have asked what you wanted, should have let you choose. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid. Your mother, when she died, you were so young. I didn't know how to raise a daughter alone. I only knew how to build things, make deals. So I tried to build you a future the only way I knew how. He paused, fighting for air. I see now that was wrong. You deserved better, deserved choice. Elara felt tears finally coming. I needed you to see me. Not as an asset or an investment, as your daughter. I always saw you, I just didn't know how to show it. His eyes closed. Too late now. It's not too late. But he drifted off again, exhausted by the conversation. Elara stayed beside him, holding his hand, and let herself cry quietly in the darkened room. The days blurred together. Elara barely left her father's bedside. She slept in the chair, ate meals brought by worried servants, read to him when he was conscious enough to listen. The Whitcomb Company managers came with urgent matters that needed decisions. She dealt with them in the hallway, making calls she barely understood about steel shipments and railway contracts. On the third day, a letter arrived from Ashmont. Elara almost didn't open it, but something made her break the seal.
Elara, I received your note. I'm sorry about your father. If there's anything you need, write to me.
A, short, formal. Exactly what she'd expected. She crumpled it and threw it in the fire. On the fifth day, a telegram came. Arriving London tomorrow. A. Row. Elara stared at the words, trying to understand them. He was coming here? Why? She was still puzzling over it when Henderson announced the next afternoon, "The Duke of Ashmont, Your Grace." Alistair walked into the drawing room looking travel-worn and uncertain. He still wore his riding clothes, boots dusty, as if he'd come straight from the station.
Elara stood from the settee where she'd been pretending to read. "What are you doing here?" "I came to—" He stopped, seeming at a loss. "Your father, how is he?" "Dying."
The word hung between them, brutal and true. "I'm sorry."
"Are you?" Elara heard the bitterness in her own voice. "Or is this about propriety? Making sure the Duke shows proper concern? That's not fair. None of this is fair."
She was too tired to fight, but the words came anyway. "You've ignored me for weeks, disappeared whenever things got difficult. And now you're here, playing the concerned husband. And I'm supposed to—"
"What? Be grateful? I'm here because you're alone. I've been alone since the day we married."
Alistair flinched. "Elara, don't." She held up a hand. "I can't do this right now. My father is upstairs dying and I don't have the energy to fight with you." He stepped closer, and she saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not pity, something more complicated. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "I'm here because you shouldn't have to do this alone. Whatever else is between us, that much is true." Ski. Elara wanted to argue, to tell him to leave, but the truth was she was exhausted, scared, and having someone else here, even someone she was angry at, felt like a relief she didn't want to admit. "He's sleeping now," she said finally. "The doctor says it could be hours or days. There's no way to know." "Then I'll stay, if you'll allow it." She studied him, looking for the angle, the hidden reason. But all she saw was a man who looked genuinely uncertain, waiting for her decision. "Fine," she said. "Stay." That night, they sat together in the drawing room, not talking much, just existing in the same space. Elara curled in a chair by the fire, Alistair on the settee with a book he wasn't really reading. Around midnight, she said, "I don't understand you." He looked up. "What?" "This, coming here. You didn't have to." "I know." "So why did you?" Alistair set down the book. "Because when I got your note, I realized something. You've been at Ashmont for over a month, and I don't actually know anything about you. Not really. I know you're stubborn and clever, and you throw spectacularly uncomfortable dinner parties. But I don't know. This?" He gestured vaguely. "Your family. Where you came from. What you're losing. Does it matter?" "Maybe it should." Elara drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "He raised me alone. After my mother died. He didn't know what to do with a daughter, so he brought me to work with him. Taught me the business instead of embroidery. I grew up in steel mills and counting houses. That's what I know. Numbers and contracts and how to spot when someone's lying about quality standards." "That's why you knew the estate accounts were wrong." "I can do compound interest in my head faster than most men with paper and pencil. My father made sure of that." She smiled sadly. "He thought it would help me, make me valuable. Turns out he was right, just not the way either of us expected. He sold you. He thought he was protecting me. In his mind, a title and security were worth more than love or choice." She looked at Alistair. "Why did you agree to it? The marriage. You could have found another heiress, someone you actually wanted." Well, Alistair was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was desperate. The estate was drowning, debts my father left, investments that went bad. I was watching everything my family built for generations just disappear. Your father offered enough to save it all. I couldn't turn that down. Even though it meant marrying a stranger?
Even though he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I told myself it was a business arrangement, that we'd live separate lives. I'd fulfill my obligations, provide an heir, maintain appearances, and that would be enough. I didn't expect... What? You. I didn't expect you to fight back, to take control, to care about the estate and the tenants and all of it. You were supposed to be decoration, Elara. That's terrible, but it's true. And instead you showed up and started actually fixing things. Is that why you kept leaving? Because I wasn't behaving like proper decoration? I kept leaving because being around you made me feel things I didn't want to feel. The admission hung in the air between them. Elara's heart was beating too fast. What things? Guilt, shame, the uncomfortable realization that I'd turned into exactly the kind of man I used to despise.
The kind who treats people like chess pieces. He met her eyes. You deserve better than what I've given you. That's been clear from the start. I just didn't know how to admit it. So you ran to Vivian. Yes. Do you love her? The question came out before Elara could stop it. She wasn't sure she wanted the answer.
Alistair looked away. I care about her. She's been consistent, safe. She doesn't ask for things I can't give. And I do? You ask for everything I'm terrified to offer. Before Elara could respond, Henderson appeared in the doorway, his face grave. Your Grace, the doctor says you should come, now. They took the stairs 2 at a time. Doctor. Morrison met them outside her father's room. His breathing has changed. It won't be long. Sen. Elara's chest constricted. She pushed past the doctor into the room. Her father lay exactly as she'd left him hours ago, but something was different. His breathing was shallow, irregular, rattling. She took his hand. Papa, I'm here. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding her. My girl, he whispered. I'm here. I'm right here. Good. That's good. Each word was a struggle. The Duke? He came? Yes. Good man. Better than I thought. Elara wanted to argue, but what was the point now? I'm sorry, her father said again. For all of it. You'll be all right. You're stronger than I ever was. Don't leave me. No choice in that, I'm afraid. A ghost of his old humor. Then his expression turned serious. Promise me something. Anything. Don't become me. Don't let business swallow your heart. Find something real. Someone real. Promise. I promise. Liar. But he was smiling slightly. I love you, Elara. Should have said it more. Should have shown it better. But I did. I do. I know, Papa. I love you too. His eyes closed. His breathing slowed, and then simply stopped. The silence was absolute. Elara sat there, holding his hand, waiting for the next breath that wouldn't come. She felt Alistair's hand on her shoulder but couldn't process it. Couldn't process anything except the terrible, final stillness. He's gone, Your Grace, Dr. Morrison said gently. I'm very sorry. Gone. The word didn't make sense. How could he be gone? He'd been right there, talking to her, making her promise things she didn't know how to keep. She stood on numb legs. Alistair was beside her, steady and solid, and without thinking she turned into him. His arms came around her immediately, holding her as the first sobs tore through her chest. She cried like she hadn't cried in years. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd allowed herself before. This was raw, desperate grief, the kind that felt like it might break her apart. Alistair just held her, didn't try to stop her or calm her, just stood there in her dead father's room and let her fall apart. When she could breathe again, when the sobs subsided into hiccups, he said quietly, Come on, let's get you out of here. He led her to her old bedroom, sat her on the bed, brought her water she couldn't drink. Outside, she could hear the household stirring, the doctor giving instructions, servants whispering, the machinery of death beginning to turn. She started. There are arrangements, the funeral, the business. Tomorrow, Alistair said firmly. Tonight you rest. I can't. There's too much. Elara. He crouched in front of her, taking her hands. You've been strong for weeks. You held his hand while he died. You're allowed to stop now, just for tonight. If I stop, She couldn't finish. If she stopped, she'd shatter. And she wasn't sure she'd be able to put the pieces back together. Then I'll be here, Alistair said. When you shatter, I'll be here. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough to let go. She leaned forward and he caught her, and this time when she cried, it was quieter, exhausted. The tears of someone who'd been holding on too long and finally had permission to let go. Alistair moved them both to lie on the bed, still dressed, still in their shoes, and just held her. His hand stroked her hair with awkward gentleness, like he wasn't sure if he was doing it right, but was trying anyway. Tell me about her, he said after a while. Your mother. Elara's voice was hoarse. Why? Because I want to know. Because you're in pain, and I don't know how to help, but maybe talking will. I don't know. I'm terrible at this. Despite everything, Elara almost laughed. You are. So tell me anyway. So she did. Lying there in the dark, in her childhood bedroom, she told him about her mother, about summer days in the garden, about her mother's laugh, about the illness that took her too fast, about being 7 years old and not understanding why her mother wasn't coming back. And Alistair listened, really listened, asked questions, let her ramble and cry, and eventually fall into an exhausted silence. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For coming. For staying. For not leaving when it got hard. His arms tightened around her. I'm sorry I did that before. Left when things got hard. It's what I do. What I've always done. But I'm trying. I'm going to try to stop. Why? Because you deserve someone who stays. They fell asleep like that, fully clothed on top of the covers, and Elara dreamed of steel mills in her mother's garden and Alistair's steady heartbeat under her ear. The funeral was held a week later. The church was packed. Business associates, rivals, friends Elara didn't know her father had. Half of industrial London turned out to pay respects to Richard Whitcomb, the man who'd built an empire from nothing. Elara stood at the front in black silk, accepting condolences with mechanical courtesy. Alistair stood beside her, a steady presence. Every time she started to sway, his hand found her elbow. Every time someone said something particularly stupid, and they did, with alarming frequency, she felt his fingers tighten slightly. A silent acknowledgement. I'm here. I've got you. The reading of the will happened the next day. Elara expected the obvious. The business would go to her, held in trust or managed by the board until she produced a male heir. That was how these things usually worked. What she got instead shocked her into silence. The Whitcomb Steelworks, in its entirety, transferred directly to Elara Rowe, Duchess of Ashmont. No trust, no male oversight, complete control. I don't understand, she said to the lawyer. This gives me full ownership and decision-making authority, Your Grace. Your father was quite specific. The business is yours, to manage as you see fit. Beside her, Alistair went very still. This is extraordinary, the lawyer continued. I advised against it, a woman in full control of an industrial concern of this size. But Mr. Whitcomb was adamant. He said, and I quote, if anyone can run it, my daughter can. She's twice as smart as any man I've ever met. Elara felt tears prick her eyes again. Her father, even in death, had given her exactly what she'd never dared ask for. Not just security, power. Real, tangible power. There is one condition, the lawyer said. Of course there was. The business remains yours regardless of marriage or heirs. But Mr. Whitcomb has specified that the Duke of Ashmont is not to have access to, control over, or claim to the company or its assets. It is yours alone. The silence in the room was deafening. Elara turned to look at Alistair. His face was carefully blank, but she could see the tension in his jaw. He didn't trust me, Alistair said quietly after the lawyer left. They were alone in her father's study, her study now. With you or your money? Can you blame him? No. He walked to the window, looking out at the London street below. He was protecting you from men like me. Alistair, I took your father's money to save my estate. That was the whole point of marrying you. And now you have more, infinitely more, and I can't touch it, can never touch it. He turned to face her. Do you know what that makes me?
What?
Powerless. In our marriage, in your life, I have nothing to offer. No leverage, no control, just nothing. Elara stood,
Facing him across the mahogany desk. Is that what you want? Leverage? Control?
I don't know what I want anymore. His voice cracked slightly. A month ago, I thought I knew. I thought I could keep everything in neat boxes. Wife in one, Vivian in another, the estate in a third, and I could manage them all separately. But you won't stay in your box, Elara. You keep breaking out, changing things, making me question everything. Good. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, I've made a disaster of this marriage. I've hurt you repeatedly, disrespected you, failed at every basic requirement of decency. And now I can't even claim I married you for your money because I'll never see a penny of it. Do you want the money? Oh. No! The word burst out of him. That's the problem. I don't want your money. I don't want your father's legacy. I want... He stopped, running both hands through his hair. I don't know. Something real, something that isn't a transaction. Then give me something real, Elara said. Stop hiding. Stop running. Stop treating this marriage like a contract you're trying to get out of. What if I don't know how? Then learn. I am. They stared at each other across the desk. This enormous piece of furniture that represented everything they were fighting about. Money, power, legacy, control. I ended it, Alistair said suddenly. What? With Vivian. 3 days ago. I told her it was over. Elara's heart stopped. Why? Because I couldn't keep doing it, going back and forth, pretending I could maintain both lives. It wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to you. And it wasn't fair to me, trying to be two different people. He moved around the desk, closer to her. I don't know if we can make this work, this marriage, but I want to try, really try. No more running, no more hiding, just trying. What made you change your mind? Oh, watching you grieve, watching you be strong and vulnerable at the same time, realizing that I've been so busy protecting myself that I never gave us a chance. He stopped a few feet away. I'm going to fail at this. I'm going to mess up and say the wrong things and probably hurt you again without meaning to. But I'm asking, can we start over? Not forget what happened, but start trying.
Elara wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to close the distance and pretend everything could be fixed with one honest conversation. But her father had just died. She'd just inherited an empire. And the man in front of her was still the same man who'd left her on their wedding night. I need time, she said finally, to grieve, to figure out what I'm doing with the company, to just breathe. This past month has been a disaster, and I can't make promises when I don't even know who I am right now. That's fair. But I'm willing to try. When I'm ready, when we're both ready to actually do the work, then I'll wait. Alistair held out his hand. Partners? Elara looked at his extended hand. This time it wasn't a legal contract, just an offer, a beginning. She took it. Partners. They shook, formal and ridiculous and somehow exactly right. The moment broke when Henderson knocked softly. Your Grace, the Whitcomb board is here for the meeting. Right. The business, the empire she'd just inherited and had no idea how to run. Elara squared her shoulders, feeling something click into place. Her father had believed she could do this, had given her the tools, the training, the power. Time to prove he was right. Show them in, she said. Then to Alistair, stay, please. I might need someone who knows what it's like to inherit something terrifying. He smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him that reached his eyes. I can do that. The board meeting lasted 3 hours. 12 men who'd worked with her father, who'd built the company alongside him, sat around the massive conference table and stared at Elara like she was a particularly interesting problem they needed to solve. Gentlemen, she began, standing at the head of the table, I know this is unusual. My father's decision to leave me the company has surprised everyone, including me. But I assure you, I am prepared to lead. With all due respect, Your Grace, one of the older men, Pemberton, she thought, said carefully, You're very young, and while we appreciate your father's confidence, running a company of this size requires experience. Yeah, I've been studying this business since I was 8 years old, Elara interrupted. I know our production capacity, our supply chains, our major contracts. I know we're behind on the Manchester Railway order and ahead on the Liverpool shipping project. I know we lost the Durham bid because Pemberton here, she looked directly at him, quoted 10% too high, despite my father's advice to the contrary. Pemberton's face reddened. I also know, Elara continued, that 3 of you are planning to resign if I take active control. You think a woman can't handle this, that I'll run the company into the ground within 6 months. She pulled out 3 letters from her bag. These are your resignation letters, correct? Silence. I accept them, Elara said crisply. Effective immediately. Henderson will have your severance packages ready by week's end. Your Grace, one of them started. No, you don't get to question my authority and then act surprised when there are consequences. My father gave me this company. I intend to run it my way. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now. Nobody moved. Good. Now let's discuss the Birmingham expansion. I have some ideas. Alistair watched from the corner, and when Elara glanced at him, she saw something new in his expression. Respect. Maybe even admiration. By the time the meeting ended, the remaining board members looked shell-shocked but compliant. Elara had made it clear. She wasn't a figurehead. She was the boss. That was terrifying. She admitted to Alistair afterward, once they were alone. That was magnificent. You demolished them. I fired 3 men. 3 men who were going to undermine you at every turn. You were right to cut them loose. He shook his head. I had no idea you were that ruthless. Neither did I. Elara sat down heavily. I think I'm going to be sick. No, you're not. You're going to have some wine and accept that you just took control of one of the largest industrial companies in England. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither does anyone the first time, but you'll figure it out. You always do. They stayed in London another week, settling her father's affairs and establishing Elara's authority over the company. Alistair remained at her side, offering advice when asked, staying quiet when not. Learning to be a partner instead of an adversary. On their last night before returning to Ashmont, Elara found him on the balcony of the Belgravia house, looking out over the city. Ready to go back? He asked. I don't know. Everything's different now. Yes. My father's gone. I own a steel empire. You ended things with Vivian. We're supposedly starting over. She joined him at the railing. What if we get back to Ashmont and fall into the same patterns? Then we climb back out, as many times as it takes. He turned to face her. I meant what I said, Elara. I'm going to try, really try. And I know that doesn't erase what I did, how I treated you. But maybe, if you're willing, we can build something new. Not what your father wanted or what my family expected. Something that's actually ours. Elara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who was scared and trying anyway, just like her. All right, she said, let's try. They returned to Ashmont Hall 3 days later, and Elara felt like she was seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't just a prison anymore. It was a project, a challenge, a home, if she could make it one. Mrs. Calloway greeted them at the door with barely concealed relief. Your Grace. Your Grace. Welcome back. It's good to be back, Elara said, and meant it. That night she unpacked her father's pocket watch, the one thing she'd taken from his personal effects, and set it on her desk. A reminder of where she'd come from, what she'd lost, and what she was building. There was a knock at her door. Come in. Alistair entered, looking uncertain. I thought we should talk about arrangements, now that we're back. Arrangements? Sleeping arrangements? I don't want to assume. I thought you should choose separate rooms or... He stopped, clearly struggling. I want to give you control over this, over how we move forward. Elara considered. The old answer would have been separate rooms, safety, distance. But that wasn't what she wanted anymore. Let's start with dinner, she said. Together? Actually together, not at opposite ends of that ridiculous table. And we'll figure out the rest as we go. His shoulders relaxed slightly. I can do that. One more thing. Yes? The tenants, the repairs. I want to finish what I started. Will you help? Of course. And the estate finances. I want complete transparency. No more secrets. We're partners now, right? Right. Then act like it. He smiled. Yes, Your Grace. Don't call me that in private. It's weird. What should I call you? Elara. Just Elara, so it. All right, just Elara. He headed for the door, then paused. Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it. No, Elara agreed. You don't. But maybe neither of us deserves what we've been given. Maybe we just have to prove we can handle it. After he left, Elara stood at her window, looking out over the dark grounds. Somewhere out there was Vivien, dealing with her own loss. Somewhere out there were tenants who needed help, workers who needed leadership, a whole estate that needed saving. And somewhere in this house was a man she'd married for all the wrong reasons, who might, just might, become something worth keeping. But before any of that, there was movement at the edge of the grounds. A figure, too dark to make out clearly. Elara leaned closer to the window, squinting. The figure turned, and for just a moment, lamplight caught copper hair. Vivien, standing at the edge of the property, looking up at the house, looking directly at Elara's window. Their eyes met across the distance, and even in the dark, Elara could see the expression on the other woman's face. Not defeat, war. Elara didn't move from the window, didn't flinch, just stood there, meeting Vivien's gaze across the darkness, letting the other woman see that she'd been spotted. After a long moment, Vivien turned and disappeared into the trees. Elara's hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger, from the cold realization that this wasn't over. Alistair might have ended things, but Vivien clearly hadn't accepted that conclusion. She went downstairs and found Alistair in the library, reviewing estate ledgers. She was here, Elara said without preamble. Vivien, just now, outside, watching the house. He looked up sharply. What? I saw her from my window, standing at the edge of the grounds, staring up at the house. Alistair stood, his jaw tight. I'll send someone. No. Elara held up a hand. Let her watch. Let her see that I'm not going anywhere, that we're not falling apart.
Elara, if she's trying to intimidate you, then she's failing. Elara moved closer. I'm not afraid of her, Alistair. I'm angry. There's a difference. What do you want to do? I want to show her, and everyone else, that I belong here, that this is my home and my life, and no one gets to take that from me. She paused. The county ball. When is it? The Haverford ball? 3 weeks. Why? We're going, together, and we're going to make it very clear that we're a united front. Alistair studied her face. You're declaring war. No, I'm ending one. On my terms. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Elara threw herself into estate management with single-minded focus. The tenant cottages got their repairs. New roofs, fixed wells, proper windows. She hired additional staff for the main house, reorganized the work schedules, and instituted regular wages paid on time. The gardens continued their transformation. The fountain was restored, and the overgrown wilderness slowly gave way to structured beauty. She also started holding weekly meetings with the staff. Unprecedented for a duchess, but Elara didn't care about precedent. Mrs. Calloway, she said at the first meeting, I want your honest assessment. What's working? What isn't? The housekeeper looked startled. Your Grace, it's not my place. It's absolutely your place. You run this house. I need to know what you need to run it better. Slowly, carefully, the staff began to open up. They told her about supply shortages, inefficient systems, long-standing problems nobody had bothered to fix. Elara listened, took notes, and made changes. Within 2 weeks, the household ran smoother than it had in years. The servants, initially wary, began to warm to her. She wasn't just the duchess who'd bought her way in. She was someone who actually cared about making things work. Alistair watched all of this with something like amazement. You're incredible, he said one evening, finding her in the estate office surrounded by paperwork. Do you know that? Elara looked up, rubbing her tired eyes. I'm just doing what needs to be done. No, you're doing what I should have been doing all along. He sat across from her. I let everything slide because it was overwhelming, but you just attacked it head on. I learned from my father, when something's broken, you don't ignore it. You fix it or you replace it. And which am I?
Fixed or replaced? The question hung between them. I don't know yet, Elara said honestly. But you're trying. That counts for something. They'd fallen into a routine. Dinners together, morning walks around the grounds, conversations that went deeper than surface pleasantries. It wasn't love, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was something. Understanding, perhaps. The beginning of respect. Alistair had also thrown himself into estate work with renewed energy. He met with the land agent, reviewed crop yields, started actually engaging with the tenants. When Elara proposed modernizing some of the farming equipment, he backed her immediately, using his connections to source quality machinery at reasonable prices. They were becoming partners, real ones. But at night, they still retired to separate rooms. Some lines took longer to cross. The dress for the Haverford ball arrived a week before the event. Elara had commissioned it from London, deep emerald silk that brought out the color of her eyes, with a neckline that was daring without being scandalous. When she tried it on, even Mrs. Calloway gasped, "Your Grace, you look like a queen." "I look like someone who spent too much money on a dress. You look like someone who knows her worth." The housekeeper adjusted the shoulders slightly. "She'll hate it." "Who?"
Miss Hargrave, when she sees you in this." Mrs. Calloway met her eyes in the mirror. "You're going to war, aren't you?" "I'm going to a ball." "Same thing, in this world." The night of the ball, Elara dressed with the help of a maid she'd hired specifically for her skill with hair. The result was sophisticated, elegant, her dark hair pinned in an intricate style that showed off her neck and the pearl earrings that had been her mother's. When she came downstairs, Alistair was waiting in the entrance hall. He turned at the sound of her footsteps and went completely still. "Elara," he said quietly, "you're acceptable?" She supplied, suddenly nervous. "Devastating." He moved closer, offering his arm. "Every man in that ballroom is going to hate me tonight." "Good. Let them." The carriage ride to Haverford Manor was tense. Elara kept smoothing her gloves, checking her hair. Alistair finally covered her hand with his. "Stop. You're perfect." "What if this backfires? What if everyone just sees me as the upstart trying too hard? Then they're fools, and you don't care what fools think." "When did you become wise?" "About 3 weeks ago. I'm still getting used to it." She laughed despite herself, and some of the tension eased. Haverford Manor blazed with light. Carriages lined the drive, depositing guests in waves of silk and jewels and barely contained gossip. The Haverfords were old money, their annual ball the social event of the county. Being invited was a statement. Attending was crucial. Elara and Alistair entered together, announced by a footman whose voice carried across the ballroom, "The Duke and Duchess of Ashmont." Every head turned. Elara felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers start immediately, but she kept her chin up, her hand steady on Alistair's arm, and walked into that room like she owned it. Lady Haverford greeted them warmly. Your Grace, how wonderful to see you both. We were delighted when we received your acceptance." "Wouldn't miss it," Alistair said smoothly. "Your balls are legendary." "You're too kind. Duchess, you look absolutely stunning. That dress." "Thank you, Lady Haverford. You're too generous." They circulated through the room, and Elara felt the shift in atmosphere. These were the same people who'd come to her dinner party, who'd assessed and judged her. But now she wasn't the unknown quantity. She was the woman who'd reformed Ashmont Hall, who'd taken control of her father's company, who stood beside her duke like she belonged there. Some of the looks were approving, others jealous. A few remained skeptical. And then Elara saw her. Vivien stood near the terrace doors wearing midnight blue that made her copper hair glow like flame. She was beautiful, there was no denying that, and she was watching Elara with barely concealed hostility. "Don't," Alistair murmured. "Not here." "I'm not going to cause a scene, but I'm not hiding either." She led him directly toward Vivien, threading through the crowd with deliberate purpose. Vivien's eyes widened slightly as they approached, but she recovered quickly, her expression smoothing into cool indifference. "Your Grace," she said to Alistair, ignoring Elara entirely. "How unexpected to see you here." "Miss Hargraves," Alistair said formally, "may I introduce my wife, the Duchess of Ashmont." The emphasis on wife was slight but unmistakable. Vivien's smile tightened. "We've met.
How are you finding country life, Your Grace? Not too dull after London. I find it full of possibilities, Elara said pleasantly. There's so much work to be done at Ashmont. Renovations, improvements. It keeps me quite occupied. How industrious. Though I suppose that's to be expected, given your background. The slight was delicate but clear. Your background, your common blood, your purchased title. Elara felt Alistair tense beside her, but she smiled sweetly. Yes, my background has proven quite useful. I actually know how to manage things, rather than just occupy them decoratively. Direct hit. Vivian's face flushed. Ladies, Alistair said firmly, perhaps we should— Oh, I think we're finished here, Elara interrupted. Enjoy your evening, Miss Hargrave. She turned and walked away, leaving Vivian staring after them. That was dangerous, Alistair said quietly. That was necessary. She needed to know I'm not intimidated. She looks like she wants to kill you. Let her want. The dancing started shortly after. Alistair led Elara onto the floor for the first waltz, and she was acutely aware of every eye on them. Relax, he murmured as they began to move. You're stiff as a board. Everyone's watching. Let them watch. We're giving them what they want. A show of unity. Is that all this is? A show? His hand tightened at her waist. No, not anymore. They danced in silence for a moment, and Elara let herself feel the music, the movement, the strange intimacy of being held by this man who was technically her husband, but still felt like a stranger in so many ways. I'm sorry, Alistair said suddenly. For what? For Vivian being here. I didn't know she'd been invited. It's not your fault, and honestly, I'm glad she's here. Now she can see that we're not falling apart, that you chose. I did choose. I want you to know that. Then prove it. How? Elara looked up at him. Stay. When things get hard, when I'm difficult, when the easy path would be to run, stay. That's all I need. Someone who stays. I can do that. The music swelled, and they turned across the floor, and for just a moment Elara let herself believe him. The moment shattered when the music ended and a familiar voice cut through the applause. How touching! Vivian had moved to the edge of the dance floor, close enough to be heard, but not so close as to be obviously confrontational. Such a pretty picture, she continued, her voice carrying. The Duke and his purchased bride playing at being happy. The conversations around them died. Everyone was listening now. Alistair's face went dark. Vivian! What, am I supposed to pretend? Everyone here knows the truth. This marriage is a transaction. Money for title. She bought her way into this world, and you sold yourself to save your estate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elara felt heat flood her face, not from shame, but from rage. This was it. The public challenge. The moment Vivian had been building toward, she could retreat. Make some excuse and leave. Let Vivian win by default. Or she could fight. You're right, Elara said clearly, stepping away from Alistair. It was a transaction. My father's money for Alistair's title. Everyone in this room knows it. But here's what you don't seem to understand. Transactions can evolve. She moved closer to Vivian, close enough that their conversation was no longer private, but not quite shouting either. The perfect pitch for everyone to hear while maintaining plausible deniability. When I married Alistair, I thought I was getting a partnership. What I got instead was a husband who spent our wedding night with you, who ran to you every time our marriage got difficult, who treated me like an inconvenience while treating you like the real relationship. Vivian's face went pale. And I could have left, Elara continued, gone back to London, ended this farce, but I didn't, because I realized something. I don't need him. I don't need anyone. I have my own fortune, my own power, my own purpose. The question isn't whether Alistair chose me, it's whether I choose him. She turned to face Alistair, who looked stunned. So here's my question, publicly, in front of everyone. Are you worth choosing? Are you worth the effort I've been putting into salvaging this marriage? Because I can walk away right now, take my money, my company, my independence, and leave you with your title and your debts and your memories. The choice is yours. Stay in the past with her. She gestured to Vivian, or move into the future with me, but you can't have both, not anymore." The ballroom was completely silent. Alistair stood frozen, clearly not expecting this, not expecting her to flip the entire dynamic and put the choice, the real choice, back on him. "Elara," he said finally. Don't say it unless you mean it," she interrupted. "Don't say it because everyone's watching or because you think it's what I want to hear. Say it if it's true." He took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes, the fear and hope and uncertainty. "I choose you," he said quietly. Then louder. "I choose you, Elara. Not because of money or title or obligation. Because you're brilliant and fierce and you make me want to be better than I am. Because you didn't give up even when I gave you every reason to. Because somewhere in the past few weeks, I stopped thinking of you as my wife and started thinking of you as mine. Actually mine." He took her hands and she could feel them shaking slightly. "I was an ass," he continued. "A coward. I hurt you because it was easier than facing my own failures. But you're right, transactions can evolve. And this one has. Into something I didn't expect and don't entirely understand but don't want to lose." He turned to face Vivien, still holding Elara's hands. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for leading you on, for not being clear earlier, for letting this drag out when I should have ended it the day I got married. You deserved better. But this," he squeezed Elara's hands, "this is my future, and I'm choosing it." Vivian's face crumpled. For just a moment, she looked devastated. Then she pulled herself together, straightening her spine, lifting her chin. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. "Maybe," Alistair acknowledged, "but it's my regret to own." Vivien looked at Elara one last time, and there was something besides anger in her expression now. Something almost like grudging respect. Then she turned and walked out of the ballroom. The silence held for another beat, then two. Then someone started clapping. It was Lady Haverford. Of all people, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Others joined in, not everyone, but enough. A smattering of applause that grew into something more substantial. Elara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry, not here, not now. "That was insane," Alistair said quietly. "That was necessary. You just declared war on half the county. Let them be angry. I don't care anymore." He laughed. A slightly hysterical sound. "You're terrifying. I'm starting to realize that." "Good. You should be terrified." "I am." The orchestra, clearly unsure what else to do, started playing again. The dancers slowly returned to the floor, conversations resuming with renewed vigor. Everyone would be talking about this for months. Elara didn't care. She'd drawn her line, made her stand, and Alistair had chosen. Whether it would last was another question. But for tonight, it was enough. They stayed for another hour, dancing, making conversation, pretending the entire ballroom hadn't just witnessed their marriage laid bare. Elara's face hurt from smiling, but she kept it up. Let them all see that she wasn't embarrassed, wasn't ashamed. She told the truth, publicly, brutally, and survived. The carriage ride home was quiet. Elara leaned her head back against the seat, exhausted. Alistair sat across from her, watching. "I meant it," he said finally. "What I said back there." "Which part?" "All of it, but especially the part about you being mine. I'm not anyone's property. That's not what I meant." He leaned forward. "I meant that somewhere in the past few weeks, I started thinking of us as an actual us, not separate people in a business arrangement, a real partnership. Because I forced you to. No, because you showed me what one looks like." He paused. "My parents had a terrible marriage, distant, cold. I grew up thinking that's what marriage was, two people tolerating each other for appearance's sake. I didn't know it could be different. And now? Now I'm starting to think maybe it can be. With work, with honesty, with someone who's willing to call me on my mistakes instead of letting me get away with them." Elara studied his face in the dim carriage light. "I'm not going to make this easy for you. I don't want easy. Easy is boring." He smiled slightly. "I want you. Difficult, brilliant, terrifying you. Flattery won't fix everything. I know, but it's a start." When they arrived home, Elara headed straight for her rooms. The night had drained her, emotionally, physically, mentally. She needed space to process everything that had happened, but Alistair followed her up the stairs. Elara, assaults. She turned at her door. Yes? Can I? He stopped, seeming uncertain. Would you like company? Just to talk, or not talk. Whatever you need. She should say no, send him to his own rooms, maintain the boundaries they'd established. Instead, she opened the door. Come in. They sat by the fire, still in their evening clothes, and didn't talk much, just existed in the same space, comfortable silence broken occasionally by idle observations or questions. Eventually, Elara said, What happens now? With Vivian? With everyone who witnessed that scene tonight? Vivian will recover. She's strong. As for everyone else, let them talk. We've given them enough material for a decade of gossip. Your reputation is less important than our marriage. I'm starting to understand that. Elara looked at him, really looked.
You're different than you were a month ago. So are you.
Fair point. She kicked off her shoes, curling her feet under her. I inherited an empire, lost my father, and publicly challenged my husband's mistress. I suppose that changes a person.
You were always strong. You just finally had reason to show it.
Or I got desperate enough to stop hiding. Either way, the result is impressive. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Alistair said, The tenants want to throw you a celebration. Did Mrs. Calloway tell you? What? No. Why? Because of the repairs, the improvements. They're grateful. They want to show appreciation. I don't need appreciation. I just need them to have decent living conditions, which is exactly why they want to celebrate you. He smiled. You're changing things, Elara. Not just at Ashmont, in the whole county. People are noticing. People like Lady Pemberton, who asked if I was planning to educate the tenant children next. Are you? Maybe. Is that insane? Probably, but so is everything else you've done, and it's worked so far. Elara laughed. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's honest, which is what we're doing now, right? Honesty? Right. She sobered. Then honestly, I'm scared of messing this up, of trusting you and getting hurt again, of trying and failing. Me too, Alistair admitted. But I think we're both past the point of giving up. When did we get past that point? For me, when I watched you face down your father's board, when I realized you were stronger than anyone I'd ever met, when I understood that I'd been given something extraordinary and had been too stupid to see it. And for me, Elara asked quietly, you tell me. She thought about it. When you came to London, when you stayed while my father was dying, when you held me while I fell apart and didn't try to fix it, just witnessed it, that's when you decided I might be worth keeping? That's when I decided you might be capable of actually trying, which is all I ever wanted. Alistair stood, offering his hand. Dance with me. There's no music. So, we'll make our own. It was ridiculous, romantic and ridiculous. But Elara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They danced in her bedroom, in their evening clothes, without music. Slow, swaying movements that were more embrace than waltz. His hand at her waist, hers on his shoulder, close enough to feel his heartbeat. This is absurd, she murmured. This is perfect. And maybe it was. Not the grand romance she'd dreamed of as a girl, not the cold transaction she'd resigned herself to. Something in between, something real. When they finally stopped moving, Alistair cupped her face in his hands. Can I kiss you? Her heart jumped. We've kissed before, at the wedding. That doesn't count. That was for show. This would be for us. Elara's breath caught. Yes, you can kiss me. He did, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she'd break or disappear. His lips were soft against hers, tentative at first, then more certain. She kissed him back, tasting wine and possibility and the beginning of something she didn't have words for yet. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, Alistair rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight? He asked. Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone. Neither do I. They climbed into her bed fully clothed, too exhausted and overwhelmed to do more than hold each other. Elara's head rested on his chest, his arms around her, and for the first time since their wedding, she felt safe. Not because everything was perfect, not because all their problems were solved, but because she wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. The next morning, Elara woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Alistair still asleep beside her. She watched him for a moment. This man who'd been a stranger, then an enemy, now becoming something else. His face was softer in sleep, the hard edges of worry and responsibility smoothed away. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him. Mrs. Calloway met her in the hallway with knowing eyes and tea.
"Good morning, Your Grace. I trust you slept well?" "Better than I have in weeks."
"I'm glad to hear it. Also," she handed over a note, "this arrived by messenger this morning." Elara unfolded it, recognizing the Haverford crest. "Dear Duchess, your performance last night was extraordinary. Half the county is scandalized, and the other half is taking notes. Well done. You've made things considerably more interesting. I'm hosting a luncheon next week for select ladies of the county. I would be honored if you'd attend. It's time we got to know each other properly. Yours, Beatrice Haverford." Elara read it twice, then looked up at Mrs. Calloway. "Is this what I think it is? An invitation to the inner circle?" "Yes, Your Grace. You've arrived. I publicly humiliated myself and my husband. You publicly claimed your power. There's a difference. And women like Lady Haverford respect power more than propriety." Elara folded the note, feeling something settle in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or just relief. She'd done it. Against all odds, against every expectation, she'd carved out a place for herself. Not as the purchased bride, not as the industrial heiress pretending at nobility, as herself. Fully herself. When Alistair emerged an hour later, sleep-rumpled and slightly sheepish, she showed him the note. "You're officially terrifying," he said. "Lady Haverford doesn't invite just anyone." Should I be worried? Probably, but also honored. That circle of women runs half the county. Then I should fit right in. I've been running Ashmont for weeks now. He laughed, pulling her close. "That you have. What's next? Reforming the entire county?" "Don't tempt me." They had breakfast together. Something else that was becoming routine, comfortable. And when Alistair headed out to meet with the land agent, he kissed her goodbye without thinking about it. A casual kiss. Easy. Like it was something they'd been doing forever. Elara touched her lips after he left, smiling despite herself. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could build something real from the ashes of their disastrous beginning. The celebration the tenants organized happened the following week. Elara arrived at the largest barn on the property to find it transformed, decorated with ribbons and flowers, tables laden with food, families dressed in their best. Every tenant family was there, along with most of the estate staff. When she entered, they all stood. Mr. Pratt stepped forward holding his cap. "Your Grace, we wanted to thank you for everything you've done, the repairs, the wages, treating us like we matter. It's more than we've had in longer than any of us can remember." "You do matter," Elara said. "All of you. This estate doesn't exist without you." "3 cheers for the Duchess!" someone shouted. They cheered, loud and genuine, and Elara felt tears prick her eyes for the second time in a week. Alistair appeared at her side, his hand finding hers. "You did this," he murmured. "We did this. No, this is you. They're celebrating you." And they were. Children ran around her skirts. Women thanked her with tears in their eyes. Men shook her hand with genuine gratitude. This was what she'd wanted, not the title or the money or the status. This, making a real difference, being seen and valued for what she could do, not what she represented. As the celebration continued into the evening, Elara stood with Alistair and watched their people, because they were theirs now, truly, dance and laugh and celebrate. "I love you," Alistair said suddenly. Elara turned to look at him. "What?" "I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you fired those board members. Maybe when you reformed the tenant cottages. Maybe when you told Vivian off in front of everyone. But somewhere in there, I fell in love with my own wife, and I wanted you to know." Her heart was pounding. "Alistair, you don't have to say it back. I just needed to say it. Once, honestly." She kissed him. Right there, in front of everyone. with tenants watching and cheering and making absolutely no pretense of discretion. When they broke apart, she said, "I'm not there yet, but I think I could be. If you keep trying, I'll keep trying. Then we'll see." And for the first time since this whole mess began, Elara thought they might actually make it. 3 months later, spring arrived at Ashmont Hall like a declaration. The gardens Elara had restored burst into color. Roses climbing the south wall, lavender lining the pathways, the fountain running clear and bright for the first time in a decade. The estate itself seemed to breathe easier, like a patient finally recovering from a long illness. Elara stood at her office window, reviewing contracts for a new steel railway expansion, when Mrs. Calloway knocked. "Your Grace, you have a visitor." "Who?" The housekeeper's face was carefully neutral. "Miss Hargrave." Elara's pen stopped mid-signature. "What does she want?" "She didn't say, just asked if you'd receive her." Every instinct screamed to refuse, to send Vivian away and be done with it. But Elara had learned something in the past months. Running from conflict only delayed it. "Show her in." Vivian entered looking different than Elara remembered. Thinner, tired. Her copper hair was still beautiful, but the vitality seemed dimmed. She wore a simple day dress in gray that made her look older. "Your Grace," she said formally, "thank you for seeing me. I haven't decided if I'm seeing you or just satisfying my curiosity." Elara gestured to a chair. "Sit. Say what you came to say." Vivian sat, hands folded in her lap. For a long moment, she just looked around the office, at the organized papers, the estate maps on the walls, the evidence of Elara's control. "You've done remarkable things here," she said finally. "Is that what you came to tell me?" "No." Vivian took a breath. "I came to apologize." Elara hadn't expected that. For what? Specifically, there's quite a list to choose from. For all of it. The wedding, the confrontations, trying to hold on to something that was already over. Vivian's voice was steady but quiet. "I was in love with him, with Alistair, for 7 years. I believed we had something real. And then your father offered money, and suddenly I wasn't enough anymore." "You were never going to be enough," Elara said bluntly. "Not because of who you are, but because of what he needed. He needed to save his estate. You couldn't give him that. I know, I've known for a long time, but knowing and accepting are different things." Vivian met her eyes. "I hated you, for months. You were everything I couldn't be, wealthy, positioned, legitimate, the wife while I was the convenient alternative. And now I see what you actually did. You didn't just marry him, you saved him, saved this entire estate and everyone on it. You did what I couldn't have done even if he'd chosen me." She paused. "I'm leaving the county, going to live with my sister in Bath, starting over. But I needed to come here first, to tell you that I was wrong, about you, about everything." Elara studied her, looking for the trap. "Why tell me this?" "Because you deserve to hear it. And because," Vivian's voice cracked slightly, "because I need to let go. Completely. And I can't do that while pretending you're the villain in my story." "You're not. I am. Or maybe we all are, just people making terrible choices and trying to survive them." There was something achingly honest in her words, something that reminded Elara of her own struggles, her own mistakes. "I don't forgive you," Elara said carefully. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did, coming to my wedding, trying to undermine my marriage, that hurt. Deeply. I know. But I understand why you did it. That doesn't excuse it, but I understand." She stood, walking to the window. "I loved someone once, before all this, a boy who worked in my father's mills. We had this thing, secret, impossible. My father found out and had him transferred to the Manchester plant. I never saw him again." She turned back to Vivian. "I understand loving someone you can't have, being angry at the person who takes them away. So I won't forgive you, but I won't keep hating you either. That takes too much energy and I have better things to do." Vivian stood. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably, but it's what I'm offering." They looked at each other, two women who'd been enemies over a man who hadn't deserved either of them at the start, who maybe was becoming someone who did. "He's better now," Vivien said. "Alistair, you've made him better. He made himself better. I just refuse to let him hide. Then you're good for each other." Vivien moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I hope you're happy. Actually happy. You fought hard enough for it." After she left, Elara sat for a long time, staring at nothing. She didn't feel triumphant, just tired, and maybe a little sad. Vivien had lost everything. The man she loved, her place in society, her future as she'd imagined it. Yes, she'd brought much of it on herself. But loss was still loss. Alistair found her there an hour later. Mrs. Calloway said Vivien was here. She was. She came to apologize. He sat heavily in the chair Vivien had occupied. "What did you say?" "That I don't forgive her, but I won't waste energy hating her either. That's very, practical. I learned from my father, holding grudges is bad business. It clouds judgment." She looked at him. "How do you feel? About her leaving?" Alistair was quiet, considering. Relieved mostly, guilty a little. She was part of my life for a long time, but that life, it doesn't fit anymore. I don't fit in it anymore. Do you miss her? I miss the simplicity. She never challenged me, never pushed me to be better. It was comfortable. He reached for Elara's hand. "But comfortable isn't what I need. You are. Even when you're difficult and demanding and making me question everything. Especially then?" Especially then. That evening, they hosted another dinner party, the fourth since the Haverford Ball. These had become regular events, Ashmont Hall slowly reclaiming its place in county society. But this time, the guest list included something new. Mr. Pratt and his wife, the Dennisons, 3 other tenant families. The local gentry nearly fainted when they arrived. "You've seated tenants at the dinner table?" Lady Pemberton whispered, scandalized. "They're part of this estate," Elara said calmly. "They deserve recognition. This is highly irregular. Then it's time to make it regular." Dinner was awkward at first. The tenants clearly uncomfortable, the gentry clearly appalled. But Elara navigated it masterfully, drawing people into conversation, finding common ground, refusing to acknowledge the social boundaries everyone else considered sacred. By dessert, Mr. Pratt was discussing crop rotation with Lord Haverford, and Mrs. Dennison was sharing recipes with Lady Hartwell. "You're rewriting the rules," Alistair murmured as they watched. "The rules were stupid, they needed rewriting. Half these people will never forgive you. The other half will follow my lead. I'll take those odds." Later, as guests departed, Lady Haverford pulled Elara aside. "You're either brilliant or insane," she said. "I haven't decided which." "Can I be both?" "Most certainly. But I wanted you to know what you're doing here, it matters. The other estates are watching. Some are horrified, but others are asking questions, wondering if they could do the same." She paused. "You're changing things, Duchess. Actually changing them. Is that good or bad? Time will tell, but it's certainly interesting." She smiled. "I'm glad you came to our county. Things were getting dreadfully dull." After everyone left, Elara collapsed on the settee in the drawing room, exhausted but satisfied. Alistair brought her wine. "You were magnificent tonight." "I was terrified tonight. Did you see Lord Pemberton's face when I seated Mrs. Pratt next to him? I thought he might have an apoplexy." Alistair sat beside her. But he survived. They all did. And some of them even seemed to enjoy themselves. Some is better than none. They sat in comfortable silence, Elara's head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. These moments had become precious. The quiet after the performance, when they could just be themselves. "I got a letter from the company board," Elara said. "They want me to come to London, present the expansion plans in person." "When?" "Next month. It'll be a week, maybe 2. She turned to look at him. "Come with me?" "To London?" "Unless you'd rather stay here and miss me terribly." He smiled. "I would miss you terribly. So yes, I'll come." "Good. Because I need you there. Not just as my husband, as my partner, someone who understands what we're building. What are we building exactly? Elara considered. Something new. Something that doesn't follow the old rules because the old rules don't work anymore. An estate that actually cares for its people. A marriage that's a real partnership. A life that's ours, not what everyone else expects. That's ambitious. I learned from the best. My father built an empire from nothing. I'm just applying his methods to a different arena. Alistair kissed her temple. I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last 3 hours. Terrible oversight. I love you, Elara Rowe. I love your ambition and your stubbornness, and the way you terrify half the county while charming the other half. I love that you make me want to be worthy of you. She turned in his arms, facing him properly. I love you too. The words came easier than she'd expected, maybe because they were true. Somewhere in the past months, between the fights and the rebuilding and the small moments of connection, she'd fallen in love with her own husband. Say it again, he said quietly. I love you. Even though you were a terrible husband for the first month. Even though you made me want to throw things at you repeatedly. Even though you're still figuring out how to be a partner instead of a problem. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm not done. I love you because you came to London when my father was dying. Because you held me when I fell apart. Because you chose me publicly when it would have been easier to choose comfort. Because you're trying every day to be better. She kissed him, slow and deep, pouring months of emotion into it. When they broke apart, Alistair said, "Come to bed with me. Actually to bed, not just to sleep." Elara's heart raced. Are you sure? I've been sure for weeks. I was waiting for you. I'm sure now. He stood, offering his hand. She took it, and he led her upstairs to his chambers, larger than hers, with a massive 4-poster bed that had belonged to generations of Rowe Dukes. This feels significant, Elara said, suddenly nervous. It is. We're finally starting our marriage properly. Months late, but better late than never. He kissed her again, and this time there was heat behind it. Intention. His hands found the buttons of her dress, fumbling slightly. I'm nervous, he admitted. So am I. We're married. We've been married for months. This is ridiculous. This is us. We don't do anything the conventional way. They laughed, and the tension broke. What followed was awkward and sweet, and nothing like the dramatic consummation Elara had imagined. Alistair was nervous, she was self-conscious, and they had to stop twice because something didn't work quite right. But it was real, honest, theirs. Afterward, lying tangled together in the massive bed, Elara said, That was terrible, Alistair supplied. I was going to say imperfect, but in a good way. Well, we'll get better at it. Practice makes perfect and all that. She laughed, burying her face in his chest. I can't believe we just did that. I can't believe it took us this long. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Elara dreamed of steel and roses and a future that actually felt possible. The trip to London happened 6 weeks later. The Whitcomb board meeting was exactly as intimidating as Elara expected, 12 men watching her present expansion plans that would require significant capital investment and trust in her judgment. But she'd prepared. Spent weeks refining the proposal, running numbers, anticipating objections. And Alistair sat in the corner, steady and supportive, his presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. The railway expansion will cost nearly £100,000, Pemberton said skeptically. That's a significant risk. It's a calculated investment, Elara corrected. The western routes are underserved. We have the production capacity and the contracts. All we need is the infrastructure. And if it fails, then we lose money. But if it succeeds, we dominate the market for the next decade. My father didn't build this company by playing it safe. Neither will I. She walked them through every detail, answered every question, and by the end she could see grudging respect in some faces and outright admiration in others. The vote was 7-5 in favor, not unanimous, but enough. Congratulations, Your Grace, the chairman said. You've just committed us to the largest expansion in company history. I know. Don't worry, I plan to see it through personally. Walking out of that boardroom, Elara felt 10 feet tall. Alistair was waiting in the hallway. How did it go? They approved it, all of it. He swept her into a hug, spinning her around right there in the corridor. I knew they would. You were brilliant. I was terrified. Nobody could tell. You walked in there like you owned the place. I do own the place. That's the point. Matbos. They stayed in London another week, attending dinners and theater performances and slowly building connections between Elara's industrial world and Alistair's aristocratic one. It was delicate work. These two spheres didn't usually mix, but Elara had never cared much about what was usual. One evening, they attended the opera with Lord and Lady Haverford. During intermission, Lady Haverford pulled Elara aside. I heard about the board meeting, the expansion. News travels fast. Always, but I wanted to tell you, you're doing exactly what women like us need. Taking power, using it, not apologizing for having it. Is that what I'm doing? Whether you mean to or not, yes. Every woman watching you is learning that we don't have to accept the limitations society puts on us, that we can demand more, be more. She smiled. You're dangerous, Duchess. The best kind of dangerous. That night, lying in bed in the Belgravia house, Elara told Alistair about the conversation. Do you think that's true? That I'm dangerous? Absolutely. You threaten every comfortable assumption about how things should work. Is that good? It's necessary. The world doesn't change because people are comfortable. It changes because someone makes everyone uncomfortable enough to move. Elara rolled to face him. When did you become a revolutionary? Rolled. When I married one. It's contagious. She kissed him. I'm glad I'm contagious. So am I. They returned to Ashmont in late spring, and Elara threw herself into the railway expansion with the same intensity she'd brought to reforming the estate. She traveled to construction sites, met with engineers, negotiated contracts. Alistair came with her when he could, learning the business side of her world while she continued learning the social intricacies of his. They were building something together, actually together. The summer brought unexpected news. Elara missed her monthly courses. Once, then twice. She didn't say anything at first. Didn't want to hope. Didn't want to jinx it. But when the third month came and went, she couldn't hide it anymore. Dr. Morrison confirmed what she'd suspected. You're with child, Your Grace. I'd estimate about 3 months along. Elara sat in the examination room, hands pressed to her still flat stomach, trying to process the information. A baby. She was going to have a baby. She should be thrilled. This was what marriages were for, what the estate needed. An heir, continuity. Instead, she felt terrified. She found Alistair in the stables checking on the new foals. We need to talk. He looked up, immediately concerned. What's wrong? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Alistair's face went through several expressions. Shock, confusion, then slowly, carefully, joy. We're having a baby? In about 6 months, according to the doctor. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. That's wonderful. Elara, that's amazing. Is it? I'm terrified. So am I. But we'll figure it out, together. She pulled back to look at him. I don't know how to be a mother. My mother died when I was 7. I barely remember her. And my father, he tried, but he was better at teaching me business than how to be a person. Then we'll learn together, make our own way, like everything else we've done. What if I'm terrible at it? You won't be. You're good at everything you actually try at. He placed a hand gently on her stomach. Besides, this baby already has the most stubborn, brilliant, determined mother in England. I'd say they're starting with an advantage. Despite her fears, Elara smiled. Flattery again? Truth. Always truth. The pregnancy changed things, but not in the ways Elara expected. She continued working, managing the estate, overseeing the railway expansion, hosting dinners. The county ladies were scandalized that she didn't immediately retire to her rooms, but Elara ignored them. She felt fine. Better than fine, actually. Energized. You're glowing, Mrs. Calloway said one morning. It's quite becoming. I'm exhausted and nauseated half the time. Yes, but you're glowing while you do it. See? The Tenant families were thrilled. They brought gifts. Hand-knitted blankets, carved wooden toys, promises to help however they could. Their excitement was genuine, touching in its simplicity. The Whitcomb board was less enthusiastic. Perhaps you should step back from the expansion, the chairman suggested during a meeting. Focus on your health and the child. I can do both, Elara said firmly. Women have been having babies while working for centuries. I'm not made of glass. But, Your Grace, the expansion continues on schedule. I'll be there to see it through. This is not negotiable. Alistair, sitting in his usual corner, hid a smile. The autumn brought the completion of the first railway section and Elara's growing belly in equal measure. She stood at the opening ceremony, 7 months pregnant and refusing to sit despite the chairs provided, and gave a speech about progress and possibility and building the future. The gathered crowd, workers, investors, local officials, applauded not just the railway but her, the pregnant duchess who'd made it happen through sheer force of will. That night, exhausted and swollen-ankled, she collapsed in Alistair's arms. I think I overdid it. You absolutely overdid it, but you were magnificent. I couldn't let them think pregnancy makes me weak. Nobody who's seen you in the past 6 months could ever think you're weak. He rubbed her aching feet. But you're allowed to rest sometimes. Even magnificent women need sleep. Did I ever tell you that you've become unbearably sweet? Blame yourself. You made me this way. The baby came on a snowy December morning, 6 days before Christmas. Labor was brutal. 18 hours of pain that made Elara understand why women feared childbirth. But she refused to scream, refused to let them send Alistair away. He stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, looking more terrified than she'd ever seen him. If I die, she gasped between contractions, you're not allowed to marry someone easier. You're not dying. Promise me anyway. I promise. Now stop talking about dying and push. I'm already pushing. Push harder. I hate you right now. I love you too. Their daughter was born just after dawn, tiny, red-faced, furious at the world. The midwife placed her on Elara's chest, and everything else fell away. She's perfect, Elara whispered. She looks like you, Alistair said, touching the baby's impossibly small hand. Stubborn already. Look at that scowl. That's your scowl, don't blame me. They named her Catherine Rose. Catherine for Elara's mother, Rose for the gardens that had started everything. The tenants threw another celebration. The county ladies came calling with gifts and advice Elara mostly ignored. The Whitcomb board sent a massive silver rattle and a note congratulating her on producing an heir. Except she's not an heir, Elara said, reading the note. She's a girl. The estate goes to whatever son we have eventually. Maybe we should change that, Alistair said. Change what? The entail, the inheritance laws, all of it. Make it so Catherine can inherit. Elara looked up sharply. That would take years, parliamentary approval. It's nearly impossible. So is everything else you've done. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try. She felt tears prick her eyes, the kind that came easily these days. Hormones and exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. You'd do that? Fight to change the law so our daughter could inherit? I'd do anything for both of you. Besides, he smiled, she's already more capable than half the peers in Parliament. Might as well make it official. Catherine Rose Rowe grew like a weed. By spring, she was sitting up, grabbing everything in reach, and generally proving herself to be exactly as stubborn as her parents. Elara managed motherhood the same way she managed everything else, with determination, occasional panic, and a refusal to do it the conventional way. She brought Catherine to board meetings, scandalizing the men who expected her to stay home. She took her on estate tours, the baby strapped to her chest while Elara inspected repairs and discussed crop yields. She refused a wet nurse, nursing Catherine herself despite the shocked disapproval of society ladies. You're setting a terrible example, Lady Pemberton said. Good. The old examples weren't working. The railway expansion was completed in April, 6 months ahead of schedule and under budget. The opening ceremony drew crowds from 3 counties, and Elara stood at the platform, Catherine in her arms, and cut the ribbon herself. This is for her future, Chicase, she said in her speech, and for every child who comes after, a world that's bigger, more connected, more possible than what came before. The applause was thunderous. That evening, exhausted but triumphant, Elara sat in the restored gardens with Alistair and Catherine. The fountain ran clear, the roses bloomed, and the evening light made everything golden.
"We did it," she said quietly. "You did it. I just tried to keep up." "No, we did it. Together. The estate, the business, this impossible marriage that somehow works. All of it."
Alistair took her hand.
"What's next? Now that you've conquered the county and reformed an industry?"
I was thinking of starting a school for the Tenant children, maybe children from neighboring estates too. Of course you were. Why rest when you can revolutionize education? Exactly. She smiled. Will you help? Always. Catherine grabbed Elara's finger, squeezing with surprising strength for someone so small.
"She's going to be a terror," Alistair said fondly.
"She's going to be unstoppable, like her mother. Like both her parents. Don't sell yourself short. You're fairly unstoppable too these days." They sat in the garden until the stars came out, and Elara thought about how far they'd come. From that disastrous wedding night to this, a real family, built from determination and honesty and refusing to accept the limitations everyone else accepted without question. It wasn't perfect. They still fought. Elara still worked too much. Alistair still struggled with stepping back and letting her lead sometimes. Catherine cried at inconvenient moments and refused to sleep on any predictable schedule. But it was real. It was theirs. And that was better than perfect. 2 years later, Elara stood in Parliament, the first woman ever invited to address the House of Lords on matters of industry and commerce. She wore deep blue, her hair pinned severely back, the Ashmont diamonds at her throat. Catherine was home with Alistair, who'd insisted Elara should do this alone, without worrying about managing a toddler and British politics simultaneously. The chamber was packed. Peers who'd come to see the spectacle, reformers who wanted her to succeed, traditionalists who wanted her to fail. Elara looked out on them all and thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago, uncertain, angry, trapped in a marriage she hadn't chosen. That girl was gone. This woman had built herself from the wreckage. "My lords," she began, her voice clear and carrying, "I come before you today not as a curiosity or an aberration, but as proof of what's possible when we stop limiting people based on circumstances of birth." She spoke for 20 minutes about industry, innovation, and the necessity of changing outdated laws. She presented evidence, cited examples, and made an argument so compelling that even the most skeptical lords had to listen. When she finished, there was silence. Then one peer stood and began to clap. Then another. Then half the chamber. It wasn't unanimous. It never would be. But it was enough. Afterward, Lord Haverford found her in the corridor. "That was extraordinary, Your Grace. You've made history today." "I made a speech. History will take longer." "Don't sell yourself short. You've proven that women can do everything men can, manage estates, run industries, address Parliament. You've opened a door that can't be closed again."
Elara thought about that on the carriage ride home, about doors and possibilities and the future she was building for Catherine.
Ashmont Hall appeared through the trees as the sun set, and Elara felt her chest tighten with something that might have been love, or might have been pride, or might have been both. Alistair met her in the door with Catherine on his hip. "Mama!" the toddler shrieked, reaching for her. Elara took her daughter, inhaling the sweet baby smell that wouldn't last much longer. How was she? Terrible. She refused her nap, threw porridge at Mrs. Calloway, and tried to eat a book. A perfect day. He kissed Elara. How was Parliament? Terrifying, exhilarating. They actually listened. Of course they did. You're impossible to ignore. That night, after Catherine was asleep and the house was quiet, Elara and Alistair walked through the gardens together.
"Do you ever think about how different this could have been?" she asked. "If I'd left. If you'd stayed with Vivian. If we'd given up instead of fighting. All the time, but we didn't.
We're here instead. Are you happy? Actually happy?" Alistair stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "I'm happy. Not because everything's perfect, it's not, but because we built something real, something that matters. A partnership that works. A family. A life I actually want to live."
"Me too," Elara said.
"I didn't expect that. Didn't think it was possible. But here we are. Here we are." They kissed in the garden, under the stars, surrounded by everything they'd built together. And somewhere in the house, Catherine slept peacefully, dreaming whatever babies dream, unaware that she was growing up in a world her mother was actively reshaping. A world where women could inherit estates and run companies and address parliament. A world where marriages could be partnerships instead of transactions. A world where the rules were no longer fixed, but fluid, waiting to be rewritten by anyone brave enough to try. Elara Rowe, who'd started as Elara Whitcomb, purchased bride and unwanted duchess, had done more than survive her circumstances. She'd transformed them entirely. And in doing so, she had transformed herself into exactly who she was always meant to be. Not decoration, not compromise, not someone else's idea of who she should be. Just herself. Fully, completely, unapologetically herself. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.